What many of us are missing in modern life is a rite of passage that brings us into an expansion on our path through sacred initiation. And when that rite of passage is performed on sacred lands that have magical beings like Ireland, it can be even more incredible. Today's guest is Neils Vantzuriel. For over 10 years, he and his partner have guided highly successful women into Ireland's wild landscapes and to forgotten sacred sites to resolve their private ache of self-abandonment. Join us to find out more.
Soul Nectar Show, the Soul Nectar Show. You're invited, delighted to discover who you are. Anything is possible if you believe. So join us on this beautiful journey. Soul Nectar Show, Soul Nectar Show.
Well, hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show where we talk about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire, we share our stories of connection to that which is greater than us, to the big mystery beyond the veil, to those synchronistic moments that lead us inexorably to a different understanding of ourselves and this planet Earth and this beautiful, majestic, physical being in the midst of a whole lot of multidimensionality. And I love to have deep conversations here, as y'all know. And this week, we're really going to be focusing on this idea of sacred initiation and being on land that has memory in a sacred way and has portals beyond the physical dimension to tap into ancient beings of light that, if they are so pleased, might assist you with your initiation. And for those of you who have gone with me to Peru, you've experienced this firsthand, how so many beautiful ancient temples and portals that there are in Peru. But right now we're going to talk about the other part of the world, the other side of things, and talking about Ireland and how it has many, many beautiful secrets that many people would like to tap into. And maybe if you're chosen, you'll get to learn about it firsthand from the beings of light. And so today we have Neils Vantzuriel with us, who is a rite of passage facilitator and the co-architect of the arrival method with his partner. And for over 10 years, he's guided highly successful women into Ireland's wild landscapes and to forgotten sacred sites to resolve their private ache of self-abandonment, and to support us all in moving beyond the exhaustion and the traditional path of no pain, no gain, and it's all gotta hurt, into this idea that it doesn't have to hurt. It can actually be filled with pleasure. And so he does that through trance work and transformative storytelling and the understanding of the neurobiology of bliss. And so we're gonna help illuminate everyone today. And I say this all in the context of knowing that trust is important right now, and that trust is earned. And so we will weave that into the conversation, because we're also sharing this conversation within a bigger context of so many revelations about spiritual leaders and inappropriately guiding women to revelations that they didn't anticipate they were going to have.
You said that nicely.
Right? And so we've already had conversations, Niels and I, about this, about how we want to address this. But we really want to talk about the importance of these sacred locations, these sacred sites, especially, many of us coming from North America potentially have ancestors that lived in the islands before we came across the seas to this continent called the United States. And if you're listening from somewhere around the world, elsewhere, who knows, maybe you also have ancestors from these special islands and potentially even a past life. And all of that could be reawakened on a sacred journey. And so it's actually really quite potent time to explore this topic, especially since we just had our conversation last week with Catrice Goddard about how do we move forward, reconciliation, land back. We're in the middle of these huge conversations on the planet. And I feel like this conversation about coming home to yourself, but also potentially coming home to lands that your ancestors lived or lands you lived on before, and you might recognize, and you might feel a call in your heart. And so that's the conversation today. So with all that said, Niels, big, tall order for today's conversation, I know, but we already covered it. So I know you're good for it. So yeah, tell us a little bit about how you came to the land in Ireland and how you started to have a conversation with these beings of light and open up connection, because that was a really profound experience that you've had.
It starts like every good story starts. It starts with a woman. My partner in crime, Elizabeth, is Irish. I am not. And I came here specifically for her. We met each other 3 times physically. And that was it for me. I was going like, oh, okay, apparently I'm moving. And that was that. The moment that I hit the floor here, set foot on the island, and so many people have this, the moment that you set foot on this land, you just notice it's different. And I got captivated, like we say here. I got bitten by the Irish bug, and I can't imagine being anywhere else in the world. I've had the great opportunity and the privilege to travel quite a bit, including to the US, to Turtle Island, and spent some time there. Beautiful country, beautiful people. But Ireland is home. Even though I didn't grow up here, I don't want to leave. And that's because the pull of there is something about this land. The spirits still walk so openly, so freely through these valleys and over these green hills. It is quite amazing. It's palpable here.
Yeah. And you were talking about in our conversation initially, we were talking about how there's so many beings of light that are on Ireland and the continent that actually there is a lot of lore about them and how they came to be there. And what are they? Are they fairies? Are they spirit guides, ancestors?
Yes. First up, fairies is a compilation term. So if you think fairies are always Tinkerbell from Peter Pan, no, think again. And also that they have wings, that is a Shakespearean and later Victorian and Edwardian addition to portray in theater the ethereal in a theater setting. But that kind of stuck, and Disney ran with it, and now we all think that fairies have wings. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't portray themselves as actually having wings when you bump into them, but this is just to say the actual fairies of Ireland are a completely different breed of being, and there are actually multiple different kinds of beings, including the old Irish gods. So we'll tackle this quickly. Ireland has a origin myth. Not a creation story, but an origin myth of how this land came to be populated. And this is in an old medieval book that is called the Lawer Gabala Erin, or the Book of the Takings of Ireland, sometimes just abbreviated to the Book of Invasions. And it talks about 6 different waves of peoples that came to this island, and always central in the story and in the imagination of the ancient Irish was the connection with the land, with the goddess, with the island of Ireland. So that origin myth talks about who came to these shores, when and how did they conquer it. Now, for our purposes, we'll talk about the 2 last waves, which are wave 5 and 6. Wave 5 was a group of beings called the Tua de Danann, or the tribe of Danu. Tua is tribe, if you will. And they are these magical beings, almost demigods of high power, incredible wisdom and insight, all kinds of attributes like swords and cauldrons that never empty, that they bring to the island, which used to be their home. They left, they came back again. And all of a sudden, there is this 6th or last wave of invaders that come into the island. And they are known as as the Milesians. Those are the modern day Irish. Now, there are 2 factions within the Milesians. I'll try to keep this short. One faction is the faction of death, led by a guy named Don. And another one is the faction that that recognizes that you have to play and sing and poetically interact with the land of Ireland and with its goddesses. That faction is led by a poet or bard named Amergin. And Amergin translates loosely to a maid of song. So where his brother Don says, no, we're going to conquer and pillage, and we're going to take over the place by force, Amergin talks and sings with the different goddesses. So a completely different approach. Long story short, the Don faction perishes at sea before they ever really reach the shore, and they give way to the Irish underworld, or Tech Don, the House of Don, and the faction that actually wants to cooperate with the land, wants to sing with it, wants to co-inhabit it with the people that are already there. They eventually win out. Now, there's still a battle. These are olden times. But eventually, the Tuatha Dé Danann, that mythical or demigod race that was already here, and the Milesians, the modern-day Irish, they come to a truce or an agreement. And the truce is the Tuatha will take the other world, that place that is a plane in parallel with the physical earth. It's not the underworld, like we said, that was the House of Don, but the other world. They call it in Irish Ansil Ella, or the plane of the light, Macmel, or the Tir Nog is a very famous way of saying it, the land of everlasting youth. They would take that section of Ireland where the modern-day Irish would take above ground. The old gods would always be able to get back to above ground, to our way of seeing Ireland, through the fairy mounts, through the stone circles, through all of the megalithic sites and liminal spaces on this land. The caves, the lakes, anything that's a break in the landscape, either man-made or natural, they could always come back again. And so they went into the other world, and the Milesians, the Irish, could have Ireland as we now know it. But that influence of those other gods is still there. Now, through literary history, those became the fairies, the folk of the hills, or the folk of the fairy rings. Those gods started to become smaller and smaller and smaller in literary history. And they came to be conflated with all of the other beings that are on this land, the leprechauns, the banshees, the headless horsemen, and there are so many different ones. Some of them are relatively well-mannered towards humans. Other ones are, you have to be very, very careful. You've got a very clear subsection between the fairies of the sun and the fairies of the moon, and the moon ones especially you don't want to mess with. But this is all to say that the influence of the old gods, now seen as fairies, is still very, very strong on this island. For one, all of those liminal places that they retreated to and could still come out of are still on this land. The amount of archaeological sites that can be found here, from ring forts to fairy forts to abandoned castles to just the single solitary standing stones, the megaliths, they are in the thousands. All of those archaeological sites by themselves number in the hundreds of thousands on such a small island. Couple that with all of the other breaks in the landscape, the mist-covered hills or lakes, the caves, the cliffs, all of that, they're all seen as access points to that other world. Meaning the influence of the fairies is everywhere here. It's drenched throughout the country because those portals are still open. And the modern-day Irish take this still very seriously. This is, on the one hand, a little bit of cultural pride of, hey, this is ours. Ireland as a nation is still very young, so it's still trying to rediscover who it is. The idea of Ireland and Irish culture is millennia old, but the Irish nation, Republic of Ireland, is just over 100 years old. So it's still trying to figure out who it is. So something like cultural pride in the fairies, yeah, they take that seriously. But on top of that, they take it seriously. Meaning, every Irish person either has a story or knows someone who has bumped into a fairy, either for good or for bad. Now, with a smile and a wink, they will tell you, of course, there was a bit of a drink involved, but that doesn't make the interaction or the experience or the cultural relevance of fairies any less. They redirect highways, literally, for fairy trees, for the potential of hacking down a fairy tree. No, we will, instead of doing that, we will just bypass that section. The tree can stay where it is, and we will just build around it. If you build a new home and you've got a ring fort, an ancient fairy fort on your land, I'm sorry, but you will have to buy the land beside it and build your new home there. And these are the most down-to-earth, sometimes fully secular or even Christian people who still believe this and act on it. And I think that is just, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, backdrop in the United States, we have Chaco Canyon here, and the current administration is trying to do drilling for oil, disrupting Chaco Canyon. So like we have like an ancient temple in the middle of our country. So it's a choice to protect these spaces, right? And to honor the beings of light that move through those spaces still happening. Chaco Canyon, I've been to it, and it happens there too. It's like very powerful to meditate there. It's like a airport, spirit airport. It's really interesting. But
I love the way that you put that, spirit airport.
It's like a spirit airport. The beings of light, they come through those round kivas. And so I've been to Ireland, but back when I was younger and just unaware of a lot of things, right? Curious, but unaware. And so I missed the opportunity to experience the sacred locations that you're talking about. I mean, we did pull over to the side of the road and go see like the remnants of a castle kind of thing, you know, and checked it out. But it didn't like land in the way that I know that it lands for people working with you. And I think that's probably because why? Because the spirits of the land don't just open up to anybody. So talk a little bit about how you had to coax, you know, and build a relationship in order to be able to bring groups to different spots.
Again, I'm not from this land, so I don't have it in my blood. So I started with a little bit on the back foot, if you will. But I just started to walk the land. I've got an archaeologist background. I'm a hypnotist and an archaeologist. So when I came to Ireland and started to figure out just how much archaeology actually was here, I started to walk the land. I was just going and started to figure out that apart from the big tourist spots, nobody is looking at these places. When you ask the farmer is incredibly proud of what he has on his land, which has a lot to do with how important local land ownership is for the Irish with the overarching problem with the British that they had. So they want to share. But other than that, there's no one going to these places. So I rocked up to places where I'm pretty sure I was the first one showing my face there in 5-10 years. And it's nothing much to see about. It's just a standing stone or a pile of rubble. But because they're not being visited, they retain their power. They're oftentimes made of megalithic stones, like you might see in the backdrop here. That is Uruk Stone Circle. Uruk is very well known. But those big stones, they oftentimes have pieces of quartz in them. And I'm going a little bit on a limb here. It looks to me that if these places are not visited often, they tend to start to build up energy and build it up and build it up and build it up. And if nobody is there to actually do anything with that energy, it just keeps on building. Where other places that are very often frequented, it keeps on being siphoned away. And between you and me, Carrie, and I know that I'm going on a bit of a woo tangent here and a bit on a limb, but the easily accessible places oftentimes get messed with energetically, either by people with a less than savory intent, so mischievous intent, or people just not knowing what the hell they're doing and just wanting to do something and messing up the energy currents within the circles.
You know, I actually did experience that because I've been, for example, to Machu Picchu with groups many times. And there was one, we had gone previously, experienced it, and then there was the pandemic. And when we went back again, we were the first group through Machu Picchu that the whole place had been shut down and closed for 8-9 months. And we were one of the first groups in the door, the first day that they opened it. And it was amazing. The pristine energy, the lack of people. It was very sparse. They weren't letting that many people in because everybody had to wear masks and they were all paranoid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it was so beautiful. It was so filled with beautiful, bright energy. And I thought, this is how it was before thousands of people would visit it every single day, right?
Perfect. Exactly that vibe. You're spot on. What I started to do here is just show up again and again and again and again. It's like building a relationship with a lover or somebody that you want to seduce, if you will. I was just so fascinated by what I was finding in nature. And at a certain moment, it almost was like the site started to go like, oh, you again? Okay, well, we're opening up a little bit more and a little bit more. And a lot what this has to do with is how you approach the sites. Now, I'm sure this is the same the world over. I just have my experience here on this land. But oftentimes when we go to the easily accessible ones, we drive up with a car, we walk for maybe 5 minutes, and we go to the site. Okay, I'm here. I might give a little offering. Now show me something. Do something for me. Or we come with the idea of, I'm a light worker, or I'm a grit worker. I am going to save this place. Irish sites do not respond to that in the slightest. There's a certain form of etiquette. There's a certain way of approaching these places. Doesn't mean that you might not, even if you have that other way of holding things, you might still have an experience, but you're really stacking the deck against yourself. If, on the other hand, you start to walk and really do this the way that the ancients used to do this, actually go walking. If you went to an ancient site, a valley over, that would take you about a day to get to. So you had to prepare, you had to bring your own food, you're sweating, you're fighting off mosquitoes and midges and randy sheep, which is an issue here in Ireland. Okay, focus. Basically, you are in a completely different consciousness state the moment that you arrive. If you then start to do something with the intent of, I am so happy that I'm here, I'm so grateful to be in your presence, understanding I come in a very long line of people who've done ceremony before here, and there will be a lot of people after me. I am just a persona, just a player here that passes through. Instead of me dreaming the stone circle is dreaming me. It is the big thing. That kind of a awareness, the places are way more receptive to that. And then something might happen. Whatever that is for you. But just showing up going like, I'm going to do grit work. Not a bad thing, not a bad intention, but there's a lot to be said about etiquette. And that is, you really have to learn that as an outsider. As an example, there is a peninsula here that I've taken clients to for years on end. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. But I always had the feeling I'm not allowed to go to the central spine of mountains in that peninsula. I was always only allowed to walk the edges. Beautiful. We had fantastic ceremony at the edges, at the cliffs. And on one day, I got the go-ahead. You're allowed now. And I found another sacred site. I was going, okay. It was basically just a gestation period for me to show that with constant showing up again and again, if I was who I said I was, if I could actually walk the walk instead of just talking about it, could I actually consistently show up in that way? And then I got permission etherically and found a site that blew me away. So yeah, it's just, you are on a bit of on the back foot as a foreigner, but that doesn't mean that you can't make a place your home. We've noticed so much here, Carrie, that yes, a lot of people that come and work with us, a lot of the women that work with us are from the Irish diaspora. They have Irish lineage and Irish blood coursing through their veins, and the land is calling them home, unequivocally. But also people who have nothing to do with Ireland whatsoever are still being drawn to this country. And they have experiences. And behind the scenes, I mentioned this one instance where somebody of Native American descent came to a site, crests the hill, looks upon the stone circle and goes like, oh my God, I remember this place. Now, if that was a fluke of I don't care, because that person was changed in that moment. Had nothing to do with Ireland, but apparently work needed to be done. So what we are noticing is that Ireland is calling its people home regardless of the blood connection, yes or no.
I love that. I love that conversation because, you know, as many of us have been fascinated by our ancestry over the last decade or so with different websites that help you test your DNA and do your ancestral research and figure out like where you were from and who your ancestors are and all of this. I mean, it has just, my mom's been invested in that for like probably 20 years, you know, and just like putting together the family albums. And I just started putting together my natural father's album, his on Ancestry, like going through his ancestors and figuring out where the connections are. And it's amazing to see how many from Scotland and Ireland. You know, I was like, okay, I have a lot there. Like almost every branch comes from there. So it's just fascinating to feel that and to just notice the synchronistic timing of things like us meeting and connecting and then feeling that the lore of the land and the lore of our ancestors. Because what's happened for many of us is that we got disconnected from the magic of the land. We got disconnected from our roots in the earth and the soil. You know, we've had a period of Western colonization, capitalistic Christian colonization mindset that made us want to be afraid of unseen things and wanted us to not talk to our ancestors and told us that was evil. And then all the witch burnings that happened and just, if you practice medicine with the earth, you're going to be punished publicly. And just so much really terrible history with that now it feels like we're on the other side of a life without that magic and a life without that feminine Mother Earth connection and a life without the invisible world. And it's a pretty harsh, empty life. And so many people now are very interested in rekindling that magic and finding out about their roots and reconnecting with the soil and having adventure, in the mystery. Something mine don't expect or didn't plan in my 5-year plan might actually happen that could change the course of my life in a moment. And I think people are getting over their fear and getting curious about what could happen on the other side of the dismantling of what has been built over the last, 500 years and such. And I just think about the displacement of people across the oceans to the Americas and how we're such a hodgepodge of all these different cultures and traditions around the world. But all of us are displaced. Even the Native Americans are displaced. Let's be honest. They're displaced off of their actual lands onto reservations. So pretty much everybody in the United States has been displaced from their origins. And so, this call is real. I feel like it's been real for African American people for quite some time as they've sought to find their ancestral connections to Africa. But I feel like it's starting to happen now as we wake up out of this white supremacy model, where we just all got to be this label called white. It's no, I'm actually Irish or Scottish, or I have ancestry here. I'm not white. So it's we're getting out of that weird classification system and maybe reopening and getting curious about our roots.
We have lost so much. On the one hand, I am certainly not somebody that goes oh, this whole system needs to be burned down, simply because as an archaeologist, I see the tragedy of the whole of human history of where we come from. And for me, honestly, my life is comparatively comfortable in comparison to 200 years ago. I get a scrap and I have sepsis and I'm dead. I still have a few things to do here. But within the progress, in the way that Western society has done that, we have lost so much of that magic, of the connection with the other world. There is a concept within Celtic spirituality that is known as core queefness, or right relationship, that really points that out, that everything around you is alive. And our universe is a universe of relationship. And it's not just with your fellow friends and fellow tribe and fellow human. No, it is with everything. And you feel that here when you're on the land. Every stone has a name, every field has a name, every lake has a story connected to it, and people still treat it somewhat like that. Now, I don't want to create or say that Ireland is all magical. Again, it's a very modern, progressive country with its own rise in secularism, still a lot of tension with the Protestants between the Catholics, although it has simmered down a little bit. But it's as modern a country, tax haven, as the US. But underneath all of that, in the reinvention and trying to rediscover its own roots, something is happening. And Ireland, even at the height of its persecution, has never lost its connection to its magic. As a beautiful example, there was a time that is known as the penal laws or the penal times. This is 1700s, that kind of time frame, where the English really start to push down on the local Catholic religion, where the English were Protestants, or better yet, Anglicans, which is a form of Protestantism, and they were pushing down the local religion to such an extent that the Catholics, the local Irish, were not allowed to practice their religion in the open. So what did they do? They went out into the countryside, they went out into the mountains and held their Catholic masses at the old sites, at the old stone circles, using the big megalithic stones as altars, inscribing them with little crosses. I'm pointing here to the fact that these places were never forgotten. They were always in the back of their minds. On top of that, when Christianity came to these shores, I'm going to steal a quote from Martin Shaw here. It came through St. Patrick, not at the tip of a spear, but at the tip of a tongue. It came in through the slaves. It came in through the lowest of the low and very slowly started to convert people through the good parts of Christianity, the love thy neighbor, and really look at the people who have less than you. Later on, a different version of Christianity came in, but that's a story for another time. In those first formative centuries, the local spirituality really started to mix with Christianity to such an extent that instead of all of the stuff that we now know of the ancient way of doing things comes from the Christian monks who wrote everything down. And some of them were doubtful, others made fun of the old religions, but by and large, they were incredibly respectful to the old ways of doing things. And you can see that in the way that they write about it, in the way that they try to keep the old stories alive. So what I'm trying to get at is that Celtic spirituality, Celtic Christianity was always a nice combination of the old pagan roots were never forgotten.
You know, I'm glad you said that because after we spoke, I had a shamanic journey with my students, and I always go on the journey with them as well. And I go inside myself and take the journey as well. And we visited the upper world, and we went to the realms of the humans as one of our stops, and where an ancestor can come and give you something and have a message or something to give you. And I actually had one of my Celtic ancestors come and hand me a wooden Celtic cross, like carved from wood. I went on Etsy to try to find one that looked like it. I found something that looked a little bit like it, but it was like this Celtic cross, and handed it to me, and then was very like barefoot and wild and like with hair all kind of crazy and curly and dancing around, and then just kind of left. And I was like, okay, well, that's that. I just made contact. So I bought one of these because I'm like, I want to have this near my ancestral altar to honor, because I have a tree of life, but I wanted to honor. This one looked like it had much of the paganism belief. It had like the circle around the top part of the cross, right? And then it had lots of carvings inside each of the stems of the cross. It was really beautiful.
The artwork is known as insular artwork. The idea here is that Ireland was very insulated. Also, the same artwork you can find in Britain as well, but it was basically insulated from the rest of the continent. The halo around it, around the arms of the cross, is known as a nimbus. Yes, for your Harry Potter fans, a Nimbus 2000. It's a nimbus. Some people say that halo either shows the holiness or the four directions. There is also a very practical aspect of this. Ireland, with its weather, there's an enormous amount of erosion going on here. If you make stone crosses without a halo here, those stone crosses, the water is going to get in there, it's going to freeze, it's going to expand, the arms are going to fall off. So there's also a very practical aspect, but that doesn't negate all of the other stuff. When the Christians came to this country, the biggest influx here was a form of Christianity that's known as monasticism. Because Ireland was so far, it's an island off the main coast of Europe. It's really out there in the Atlantic. So a lot of monks came here to do monasticism, to basically have a little cell on an island and fish or have goose, sell the goose eggs at the local market, and just take the rest of your life and contemplate and meditate on the divine. So it was a very elevated version, if you will. So monasticism and the old monks were incredibly important for the foundation of Ireland. And later, when the Roman Empire fell and a lot of Europe fell back into not being able to read or write, and into the barbaric movements that overthrew the Roman Empire, it was the Irish monks that basically re-civilized large parts of Europe. And when I say re-civilize, brought back reading and writing and tried to bring their pagan version of Christianity back to mainland Europe. Eventually, they were beaten out by the Roman Church and by the British Church, and I'm taking a lot of shortcuts here. But the point that I'm trying to make here is the deep devotion to the divine was happening here just like it was done before, but now by monks. And it had such a huge impact on the monks here that they actually tried to save civilization as they thought that it was and bring it back into Europe later on. There's an interesting book here that your audience might know, that's known as How the Irish Saved Civilization. Now, it's a bit hyperbole, but I'm just pointing out here, even under the guise of religion, this island has had a huge effect on people's spirituality.
Yeah. And it's beautiful because it is the land, right? It's being on the land and being in that. And you said the goddess several times. So that goddess energy, that divine feminine energy, that is the root of most paganism, right? Is the goddess. And so talk about how the goddess shows up in your experiences that you host for people.
Privately, not privately, we're starting to hear this more and more. Ireland is the island or the land of the goddess. And I know that is a big title, but we stand behind it. There is so much to say about this, from the Morrigan to the Kayak to Eru to Fotla to Bamba. There are so many goddesses that are central to... Oh, we shouldn't forget St. Bridget, because if there are any Irish people listening, they're going to flail me alive. You didn't mention St. Bridget. She's very big. She's almost more important here than St. Patrick actually is. Side note. The connection with the land itself was always seen as feminine, as the place where fertility comes from. And the way that you interact with it determines how, for example, your harvest comes out. The way that a true king holds himself has a direct reflection on the land. When the Milesians first took over the land from the Tuatha De Danann, they made the promise, we're going to sing to the land, we're going to take good care of it, we're going to treat it as a lover. They neglected Ombat, and they didn't honor the goddesses from the Tuatha De Danann with the right tribute, and the land started to really falter. The harvest started to fail, and the land started to suffer until the Tuatha De Danann came above ground and said, hey guys, you're not really holding up your side of the deal. This is what you need to do to honor us, and otherwise this land's not going to produce anything. This has always been in the consciousness of the Irish. It is such an integral part, and one of the things that we do in our ceremonies is, again, right relationship, Corcuivness, is honor the goddesses and first just introduce you to them. On day 0, we go like, hey, this is Carrie. Carrie is going to be working with some energies and just saying hello, bringing little offerings later on during the week. And then depending upon what happens within ceremony, weaving those energies in, because we are not working in a vacuum. We're working in a highly complex ecosystem with different forces all going about their own business. And now we are just intervening. No, you have to do this with a certain amount of etiquette and a certain amount of holding yourself nicely, treading lightly through the land, if you will. The kings of the ancient Irish, before in the High Middle Ages and late early Middle Ages, the kingship became father to son. So before it became hereditary, the different tuas or the different tribes all had their own underking, and a king was not always selected upon the lineage or the heritage, although it tended to stay within certain families, but multiple people could put out their claim. And the person that was actually chosen by the tribe to become the king needed to show first up, being very politically astute. They needed to have a good relationship with other tribes and be very hospitable for when strangers came. So be very good in relationship. But the most important thing is, how is he with the goddess? Can he make basically love to the goddess in the way that it needs to be made love to, that it needs to be spoken to? Because ultimately they were married to the goddess. And if you as king messed up, the harvest would falter. And on a very harsh island like Ireland, that's a death sentence. This was taken very seriously. Ireland in the summer, when the tourists come, beautiful, heaven on earth. But the other half of the year, oh dear Lord, it is rough living here. It is really rough living here. And if your crops fail, you are in trouble. So your relationship with the goddess is central. The goddesses of Ireland were always seen as sovereignty goddesses. There are so many tales about sovereignty and the right to rule either a kingdom, a land, or your own self that are connected with the goddesses. So what we do, of course, with the ceremonies that we hold, a lot of the ladies that work with us try to recover their own sovereignty. They're either in burnout or they're in a time of their lives where they've given everything to everyone else. They've been the rock for everybody else, and they've lost themselves along the way. Then getting into contact with a land that breathes sovereignty, the will of freedom, but also making it through your own way, that's the Irish. We weave those energies in.
That's so
Now,
powerful.
that was a beautiful ramble, but...
No, that was beautiful. And that conversation about listening to the goddess and paying attention to the goddess and prioritizing her pleasure is important for this conversation. And it's really antithetical to what's happening in the United States right now and everything that we have had to face, with the disclosures about global elites and how they've been treating girls and women and for a long time now and not having any consequences. And then now spiritual leaders affiliated with that. And I know it's on people's hearts, which is why, I'm bringing it up, is that, and I had told you about a spiritual business that I had been to. I feel like using meditation, orgasmic meditation in a really inappropriate way with women's bodies sort of, harvesting women's orgasm. That is just, I'm against that. So I'm a no for that because I feel like these are sacred energies in our bodies and women have already been harvested. We've been harvested in so many ways for others' pleasure. And so what you're talking about here is more about allowing a woman to navigate her own pleasure is what I heard you say when we had our first conversation. So talk a little bit about that and how that plays out in your retreats.
First, let's just sit with that. I don't want to just skate on by what you just said. And especially the revelations of the spiritual people that were in the Epstein files, that blindsided me. I didn't see that one coming. But you're pointing to a far larger problem. So I just want to acknowledge that. Anybody who's been in the spiritual business or in the alternative field for any amount of time will have bumped into these kind of people. And I call them the linen pants predators, either people who mean well, but within their meaning well, being completely broken and not knowing what they're doing, cause an enormous amount of harm unintentionally. Or, again, it's the same with what happens with the sacred sites and people messing with it. Either it's intentionally or it's unintentionally, but still having the exact same outcome, a trail of broken people behind them. This is a reality in the field that we're in. The work that we do is, we call this a rite of passage or a sacred rite of passage, a container where we guide you into the depths of rediscovering yourself for about 4 to 6 months with a culmination of at least 6 to 8 days at least here in the Irish mountains in one-on-one time, where we prepare you at least a couple of weeks ahead of time. Then you're with us, and then we walk you back out again and integrate and root you and witness you making all of those changes. One of the tools that we use within that is a tool that is known as growth through pleasure or the pleasure path. It is the antithesis or the exact opposite of growing through pain. Something that I started to notice while I was working as a trance worker at these sites was something really, really interesting. The better that the women, and I work specifically with women for multiple reasons which we can go into, but the better that the women felt while they were in trance, the deeper the psychological, the identity level work would tend to stick the moment that they went back home again. Now, you still have to do a lot of work when somebody goes home. It is not a magic bullet, but the more pleasure that they felt, the better that they felt, the more joy or awe or inspiration or pride, the deeper that those things started to stick. And I wanted to go like, okay, I'm witnessing this. What the hell is going on? So being an archeologist, being a hypnotist, always digging underneath the surface, I started to go into neurobiology and started to figure out what is going on with my clients. And I started to figure out there are actually pathways in our neurobiology and in women's neurobiology specifically that prime them to not only have to grow through pain, but that they can grow through actual pleasure as well. One way that we do this is, for example, anytime that you do the right thing for that new person that you want to become, we teach you to feel waves and waves of goodness through your body. That can be any pleasure that you choose. That can be pure joy. That can be spiritual bliss, whatever you want. So it's basically a reinforcement mechanism. On the other hand, there is the option of going into heightened states, and those heightened states release so many neurochemicals that are primed to change the actual wiring of your brain, of who you are and how you hold yourself. It tunes down the inner critic and all of the prison guards of the analytical mind. Pleasure is fantastic in what it does on a neurobiological level for change work. I won't go into any more details there. This is one-on-one work. That means a bald, bearded guy in the mountains of the middle of nowhere is taking you to sacred sites to do pleasure work. Yeah, let's just sit with that for a moment. Every single alarm bell that you have should be going off. The only thing that I can do is go like, yeah, that's true. Trust is earned. You show up ahead of time with people and you show them exactly who you are, what you are willing to do with them, the framework, the boundaries within those frameworks, and then you bloody hold yourself to that. The pleasure work that we do is the clothes they stay on. I touch people on the wrist, on the elbow. I might hold you by the back of your neck if you're at the edge of a cliff so that you don't fall off, because then we're in a whole other section of problems. But that's where it stops. And then we teach you to get into contact with the reward centers in your own mind, and that you can become fully self-dependent upon your own pleasure, your own reward systems. That if we never see each other again, doesn't matter. You've got access to those things that every time that you do the right thing, you feel amazing. So again, one of the tools that we use, but it's a very impactful tool because it changes everything. What if every time that you come home and you say no to that annoying boss, or that you state your boundaries and that you hold your boundaries, you don't feel guilty, you feel a wave of pleasure? What would that change? That's what we teach the women that we work with, among many other things. Within that larger container, there is a lot of trust that goes into this. But you feel safe, you feel cherished and held, protected, you feel anchored. That's my job. Number one, guiding you to the places. But on top of that, anchoring you so that you can do the work. And then from there, we see what happens. And I do mean that. We see what do you want to work on? Because let's be honest here, I'm 43. What do I have to tell a 65-year-old woman that is into her eldership about how she needs to hold the world or the tribe around her? I have no freaking idea. But that's not my job. My job is to give you the tools, make sure that you can use the tools, and then hold you energetically after we've done all of our hiking so that you can do the change work inside yourself. That is true empowerment. The weirdos in this kind of, sorry for my French, but the less savory types within this kind of work keep you dependent or don't inform you about what's going on. Everything is informed ahead of time. And we want to make you fully self-dependent. That is basically, I want to have you as a puddle of bliss and a happy bundle of joy the moment that you go away from us, purely in your feminine, in your open receptivity, but fierce and strong like the old Irish goddesses. That is my aim. And we give you the tools to do that.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes. Thank you for speaking to that, because it's an important conversation that needs to happen. And especially, I know we talked before and it was like, that makes me so angry. Yeah. It definitely, a lot of people in this work really angry that it's abused that way. And again, as part of being sovereign is having discernment, because you have to be able to discern the truth of things. And part of why I think some of these things have happened, and this is not about victim shaming, but this is about things happen because we have to be able to discern by listening to our own bodies and our own hearts, what's right for us and what's not right for us. And so we'll get these different choices, and then we'll have to discern, is that correct for me? Is that not correct for me? And nobody else can tell you that. It's your own choice. You're the only one that can decide if it's right for you, if it's not right for you. And being able to say no is just as powerful as saying yes. And I know we have all the teachings right now about just say yes to everything. And I'm like, no, don't say yes to everything. There's some things you say an emphatic no to. And no is very powerful. So, yeah.
I'd like to add one additional thing here. The work that we do, it is purely non-therapeutic, meaning that this is not therapy. This is not clinical. I'm out there in the mud and the rain, and the midges and the scorching sunshine with you. It's very intimate. It is intended to be that way. In that intimacy, you get a bond. The deep trance work that we do basically means that a very interesting phenomenon starts to happen. You start to feel what I feel, and I start to feel what you feel. That means there is no hiding. Not for you, but also not for me. If I have intent that is not crystal clear, if there is something that is not in its place, you will feel that. And it will shut the whole process down. Everything that we have been working on all those weeks ahead of time, building up to get you to Ireland, so that once you're here, you're primed and you're chomping at the bits to go. And then I show up and I'm not clear in my intentions. You will pick up on that probably on day 0. And the moment that we do the first trance session, you will definitely pick up on it if I am not clean and clear and don't hold myself in the utmost pure, gentlemanly, mentally way. That is something beautiful that happens in trance. You cannot hide. So it is a constant process of trusting and letting go more and more and more. And within that safety, it is so good for somebody else to drive for just a moment and to show you what you are actually capable of. To go like, this person doesn't want anything from me. I can just let go and see whether, oh dear Lord, this is possible. For example, it's so much fun to work with the elderly ladies, if you will, the more mature ladies. So let's say 65 and up, to see them just open up like that. God, I didn't know that this kind of interaction could be possible. And you just go like, pretty fun, isn't it?
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, really beautiful, Niels. And I know that this is going to spark people to be interested to get to know you. And how do you have a way for people to get to know you, like besides the interview? Like how do you handle that?
Carrie, thank you so much for letting me ramble through this episode. I really enjoy connecting with you. If people do want to reach out to me, I'm sure that you're going to add the link down in the description. But if people can't find it, you can contact us on adventureinquietplaces.info. That's adventureinquietplaces.info. There are videos, there are testimonials, there is a deep description of what we do, how we do it, why we do it, who we work with. And then every button on that page gets you to basically talk to me, to book a call and go like, hey, can we work together? Are we a good fit? I can only take 20 women into the wilds per year. It's really one-on-one work. And the tourist season in Ireland is really short. And after 20 women, I need a break. I need the rest of the year too.
I bet.
It's really deep work.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much for your transparency and willing to have the full conversation. I'm glad I always connect with people in advance, y'all. So we cover like Carrie's little spidey senses go off and say, well, I want to know about this. I want to know about this. I want to know about this. And so we have that conversation. And yeah, thank you so much for your transparency and willingness to go there. And so everybody, adventureinquietplaces.info, where you can find out more information about Niels and his partner and what they're doing and how they're leading these sacred rites of passage. And yeah, so we're going to end with
one
kisses.
last thing, Carrie.
Oh, okay.
I'm so sorry. I'll make it very quick.
Okay, one more thing.
You have to jump. This is the last thing, purely as for something for your audience to take along with. So we've been, the last little section of our talk, we've been really clear on safety, sovereignty, keeping your own boundaries. As a trance worker, please take this along. Trance happens all day, every day, and oftentimes it happens when we don't expect it. If you are ever in a situation where, one, you are learning something new or are in a new situation, couple that with an authority figure, those two, new situation or new place with an authority figure, your subconscious mind is wide open. Be very careful who you're listening to at that time. Don't just take anything in, because you're slipping into a altered state really quickly in those circumstances. Couple that with physical activity. Okay, we use that for good with the hiking, but think, for example, boot camp. People are not brainwashed, but things get into the subconscious. Be careful, be aware. Hope that was helpful.
Thank you so much for that last nugget. Ooh, appreciate that, Niels. Thank you so much. That's good. Mindfulness. Everybody, like and share, subscribe to this episode, and also be sure to share it with anybody that you think would be interested in this kind of thing. And I'm going to give everybody kisses now, Niels, if you want to join me. I like to give kisses to people on the way out. So here come the kisses, everybody. Mwah. And we'll see you next time on Soul Nectar Show. Bye for now. If you found even one gold nugget in this episode of Soul Nectar Show, will you do us a favor? Will you subscribe, like, and share this episode? Maybe even write a comment and let us know what you thought about it. We really, really want to engage with you at a much deeper level. Let's be part of community together. Have a great week, everyone. Bye for now.
Soul Nectar Show. Awaken or Nectar Show. Take a sip from the drip of the nectar, from the source of who you are.